The incentive structures at SDTC were based on how much money you spent and how fast you sent it out, not how effectively you used it.
Do you believe the minister was aware that this was all going on?
I believe that during the time at which that March 2023 to October, he was aware of the situation the whole time.
This is wild. This is worse than a Rive can.
After everything that's been discussed here, has anybody been fired?
I think there's been a lot of convenient retirements.
Champagne knew of all this crap that was going on. Trudeau knew of all this crap was going on.
How is this allowed to happen?
I heard my colleague from South Shore St. Margaret's call it a culture of corruption.
There was always this political pressure on the ADM and the Deputy Minister to provide an end of this investigation.
It's actually next level corruption with adrenaline shots and then steroids to follow that.
The executives were rewarded for spending taxpayer money as fast as they could.
This is the worst scandal I've seen in my time here.
My fear is that they're going to continue to hide certain aspects of the situation.
Do you believe that they're trying to participate in a cover-up with the work that they're doing in this report?
Absolutely.
Welcome back to part 4 of our coverage on the Standing Committee on Public Accounts and the testimony of Witness 1, the whistleblower in the SDTC scandal that has taken Canada by storm.
Let's take a look.
Has anybody been fired in the bureaucracy? After everything that's been discussed here, has anybody been fired?
I think there's been a lot of convenient retirements.
Yeah. So retirement means, you get your pension and, and in many cases, they'll probably give you a severance package as well.
Yeah, it depends on when you started. As far as I recall, public servants before a certain date would receive severance even if they quit or retired of their own volition.
Correct.
And that was something that we didn't know until you started working in the public service. Although you weren't one of the people that qualified, there were people before a specific date, which escapes me, that would qualify.
Yeah, and at one point they gave them the option of, receiving, a lump sum or, they waited anyway. Yeah, convenient retirements, exiting with grace, probably with some money versus being fired, meaning you get no severance, you get nothing.
Well, sometimes they'd make you sign an NDA, which I think is why there were so many NDAs, is that people were either forced out or maybe they just didn't want to be there anymore. And unfortunately, that's how employers can kind of hold your feet to the fire. Be like, well, we're getting rid of you, whether you like it or not. And you can either sign this and get some money or
you get nothing.
Yeah, you can get nothing. But if you sign this, you have to stay quiet. Unfortunately, it's a common tactic in the workplace, not just within government, it happens in the private sector too. And I personally think it's wrong. I mean, you shouldn't have to sign over your silence just to be able to afford to keep living, essentially.
Well, and just so everybody understands, NDAs are not always a bad thing. There's commercial NDAs or contract NDAs. Those are actually a really good thing. So when two companies are working together, there's usually, either an NDA or what's called a mutual NDA, non-disclosure agreement, or a mutual non-disclosure agreement, which means that for any of the intellectual property that is being discussed or reviewed by both companies, neither company can distribute that or release that to any other entity. So it protects the property and the work that you're actually working on. That's a good thing. And many employees that work for private organizations are covered by non-disclosure agreements when they enter the organization, just in terms of any of the potential proprietary technology or products or any of the IP that they may be exposed to. They can't then leave the company and take that to a competitor or anything like that. They could be sued for that. So that's when NDAs are good.
When it becomes a problem, in my opinion at least, is when the company or the employer is doing something wrong and they basically say to the employee, if you don't sign this NDA, we're going to fire you with no money and you're going to be out of a job and you're not going to have a way to support yourself. But if you do sign this NDA, we'll give you some money and, maybe it'll be enough to tide you over until you have your next job.
It's a nice little legal way to commit extortion.
Pretty much.
That's an interesting way of putting it. This is really, I heard my colleague from South Shore St. Margaret's call it a culture of corruption. It's actually next level corruption with adrenaline shots and then steroids to follow that. This is the worst scandal I've seen in my time here. One of the questions I have is with the contribution agreements, like provincially I was a minister, if we wanted to spend outside the threshold, I know this is different, but we would have to go to the Executive Council and then we could maybe spend more if that was something that the government was going to do. Doesn't Parliament have to approve spending outside of what the contribution agreements lay out?
I think with regards to maybe some of those payments or things, SDTC was always below the targeted spending that gave the executives their bonuses. So a lot of these approvals were made to offset what was still available to them under the contribution agreement. So let's say you had a target to spend, because again, the incentive structures at SDTC were based on how much money you spent and how fast you sent it out, not how effectively you used it. And in certain cases, when you didn't meet that target threshold that you needed, you would then provide some level of, automated funding or something like these COVID payments to meet the amount that you were technically available to give out.
But
Did I hear that right? That the SDTC got money based on how fast they could spend money?
The executives received bonuses based on how much money they spent. If they spent too little, they didn't get bonuses.
So they got bonuses, which were taxpayer paid,
Correct.
right? Based on how fast they could spend taxpayer money, not how accurately or how well they invested. It was just how fast.
Right. So what he's saying is, as they approached, these different periods throughout the year where they were evaluated on their spending, if they weren't meeting the threshold, and as he said, they often didn't meet that threshold, what they would then do is be like, okay, well, let's just bulk approve a bunch, and there we go.
That's
we have our bonuses.
Horrific.
It's insane.
That's disgusting. How is this allowed to happen? Was this happening under Chrétien and Harper?
No. This is the difference, because everything was being evaluated properly under. Now they may have had the same incentive structure. It's hard to know.
At-risk pay.
Yeah, it's hard to know without seeing what their bonus structure was at the time. But per the old Auditor General reports, everything was operating
Normally,
above board.
Yeah.
So even back to the there was no alarm bells and red flags raised during the Chrétien years, during the Harper years. It was only after 2019 that all of these concerns started to be raised. In 2019, that's when Annette Verscheren was appointed chair of the SDTC.
This is still shocking to me. Like, I can't get my mind around this. This is the first time I'm hearing this information, that the executives were rewarded for spending taxpayer money as fast as they could.
Yeah. That sums up the Trudeau government in a nutshell.
Oh my goodness.
But $58 million was spent by the board outside of the contribution agreements, which to me seems like illegal behavior by the board. But I would assume that only Parliament could approve spending estimates. That's where I was curious on that.
Potentially. I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, me neither.
Well, good thing Mr. Stewart's got a lawyer on either side of him.
Right?
So, next question. The minister claims the department became aware of mismanaged conflict at the start of the year in 2023, but it's potentially apparent that the minister could have become aware as early as May 2022 based on audio recordings. In your assessment, how likely is it that the minister was more than aware much before early of 2023?
I think it's unlikely. I think George Chahal's just lying, honestly. But I would assume, like, from some of the conversations I had within that ISET investigation, there were indications that there had been other problems previously reported to ISED as it pertains to SDTC or its executives or board. So there is the possibility that there was something that was potentially known to ISED prior to this situation, but maybe nothing as specific to the situation that we're talking about right now.
So again, really, really credible answers coming out of Witness One. So the Conservatives offered him, a possibility to impugn Champagne's character even more so. No, that's even, possible. But asking him, is it possible that Champagne knew even prior to early in 2023 that this was going on? And rather than say, oh yeah, absolutely, he probably knew, Witness One chose to say, probably not. I just think the other Liberal was lying. So, as we talked about before, it's probably both. Chahal is lying that he actually took the guy's concern seriously and went and talked to ISED about this and raised the concern. And Champagne's lying about when he actually knew. Did he know only in September of 2023? No, absolutely not. Not according to Witness One. He knew far before that. At least in May of 2023, months and months and months earlier. And never mind the fact that the Auditor General let ISED know in December of 2022, and nothing was really done forever. So, this is what he's talking about here. So, lots of respect to Witness One for how he's choosing to answer these questions, truthfully.
So essentially what you're saying, though, is the ADM who was privy to all of it, I don't remember the individual's surname at this moment, but that ADM would have had to brief the Deputy Minister, and it's the Deputy Minister's responsibility to brief the Minister. That's a lot of time going by. It seems very unlikely that the Minister wasn't aware.
Correct.
Do you believe he was aware? Outside of George Chahal, just what do you believe? Do you believe the Minister was aware that this was all going on?
I believe that during the time at which that March 2023 to October, he was aware of the situation the whole time. He was not just given an awareness at March and then he conveniently forgot about the situation for 8 months up until the point, because again, within the context of the conversation that occurred, one of the things that was continuously explained to myself was the fact that there was always this political pressure on the ADM and the Deputy Minister to give updates and provide, some sort of an end of this investigation. So the only reason that would happen is if there was a continuous conversation back and forth about the situation.
100%. So, and it's interesting that they were sharing that they were getting this political pressure. But yeah, who else would that come from? Except, their boss, the Minister. So now we're back to March of 2023. And Champagne is trying to convince everybody that he didn't know until 6 months later. Come on.
I do just want to pick up on the question that my colleague Ms. Yip asked earlier. As the transition is happening from SDTC to the NRC, what recommendations do you have for the programming as this is taking place?
Again, I don't know, recommendations as it pertains to the people there or recommendations to the funding. I think if they truly want to have any aspect of this survive and protect the companies that legitimately receive the funding, I think the government needs to do a better job to provide public confidence that they're actually addressing the issues, because my fear is that they're going to continue on the pathway that they've been in, and they're going to continue to hide certain aspects of the situation. And once it moves over to NRC, there's a higher risk that something comes out and that would then permanently impact a federal department. I think that one of the reasons why this transition is going to take a long time is that with all of this wrongdoing and misconduct that's already been founded, that is going to impact companies. I know that there's been companies that have potentially maybe gone bankrupt because of this situation, that is a huge legal liability that SDTC executives have created for the federal government. So, as a taxpayer, they should deal with that situation before it's brought into the federal government itself. And I think the idea that they're bringing in SDTC to NRC and then spinning it back out doesn't seem like a logical situation, because that kind of seems abusive to employees, where you are winding down an organization, setting it up on the inside, and then spinning it back out over a 3-year period. It kind of sounds like purgatory or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, that actually leads into my next question, and I appreciate your answer. So how can we ensure that with this overhaul of the framework for SDTC, that employees are going to be best protected, and that stricter policies and adherence to accountability and oversight are in place so that SDTC can carry out its mandate and, as you mentioned before, be able to serve a lot of really important companies in the clean tech sector?
I think one of the things with this whole McCarthy-Tetro thing is, as much as the committee member says that the report is legitimate, I think there's a lot of long-term anger within employees about how all of that turned out, and that, some of these implicated individuals below the executive level being moved into this organization, there's a lot of bad blood that's going to stay there. And again, there still hasn't been a reconciliation of the actual abuses that occurred. So until that actually happens, all that's going to happen is, okay, the same people that were abusing on SDTC side are now going to be at NRC, and now they have a bigger pool of employees to abuse or, do bad things against. So transparency seems to be an issue that can't be addressed by the current government. So again, it's like I can give unlimited things that sound logical, but until the government proves that they're actually going to be transparent about what they're doing, they haven't even given the RCGT report to the committee. They haven't even released it to the public. All of these things that supposedly exonerate everyone and supposedly should be giving confidence, there's no proof of any confidence right now. And again, we wouldn't be having this committee meeting if there was actual transparency to the situation.
But this is going to be the most transparent government in the history of Canada.
You mean it's not? We shouldn't joke. It's one of the things I think that frustrates us the most, is that's what JT ran on back in 2015. He said all these horrible things about Harper and his government, used the prorogation that Harper had to do in 2008 against him, which we discussed on our live stream last night, and why JT was manipulating the truth. Just all these falsehoods. And then it's like, but vote for me. I'm going to be the most transparent government ever. And look at all the corruption of this government. This is definitely the most corrupt government in my lifetime, possibly even in the history of the country. I'm not sure.
Well, again, the number of scandals on Wikipedia for this government keeps growing.
Right.
And a year ago, I think they were already at a third of all scandals in the history of the Canadian nations. So
and what's most disgusting to me is look at how badly Canadians are suffering right now. We're suffering with the homelessness crisis. We're suffering with the high cost of living, grocery prices. And these liberals are just like, you know what? That doesn't matter. I'm going to keep taking taxpayer money so it benefits me and my friends.
Yeah, it's beyond disgusting. So, and then you look at, what the Liberal government is doing to kind of rectify the SDTC. So they're like, okay, we're gonna shut down SDTC, but we're gonna keep all the employees that all of the employees and whistleblowers were complaining about, and we're just going to move them into the National Research Council, which is a federal agency, and there's many abuses that were alleged to have been perpetrated by some of these employees that are being moved into the National Research Council, and they're still going to be there.
Well, and I think that's something that we've said before. When you have a workplace that's so toxic and so corrupt, the good people start leaving. Either they leave of their own volition or they get fired, and then all you're left with is just the rot and the corruption.
So now you're going to end up with these people, as per witness one, potentially overseeing many more people as they restructure the NRC, National Research Council, to put more people under these people. And now where are you going to get it? Like, it's insanity. But again, this is the Trudeau government. They keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, and they're just hoping that this is just going to go away.
You've made some pretty serious claims about the work of McCarthy's, and I'm just curious, do you believe that they're trying to participate in a cover-up with the work that they're doing in this report?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay.
You know, I like what I really like about that answer is witness one did not qualify. It was just like, absolutely, like without a doubt. I don't even need to explain myself because it's 100% happening.
Well, and I think the Liberal was expecting no, I think it's more the Liberal government, kind of, again, it was almost a trap question trying to lead him into this, you're just angry at the Liberals.
I wonder if Wheeler was expecting an answer like, yes, because blah, 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 blah. And then he was looking to come back and rebut all that
retort,
stuff. Yeah. Which he didn't have the opportunity. When the answer's just straight out absolutely, what are you going to say? There's nothing to rebut.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you again to the witness for being present here today and helping us in our study related to SDTC. I understand your frustration. I'm frustrated as well with the very real fact that it seems as though the government doesn't take these claims as seriously as you do, or as I do, as others do, in relation to the serious HR complaints that are present within, or were present within, the former SDTC. It's disturbing. And to be very frank, I'm upset to know that the evidence you submitted here today via your testimony regarding racism, anti-2S LGBTQ rhetoric within the department went without support for so long. And I know there's many victims of this, and to them, I want them to know that I hear that, and I would hope that the government does its best efforts to ensure that there's justice for those victims.
All right, so this is where the NDP starts to falter in committee, because, sure, he's saying that he's upset that the HR component of this hasn't been taken seriously, and everybody should be upset that the HR component hasn't been taken seriously. But he's focusing on that, and not as well as the hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone out the door.
Yeah, we're not saying it's not important, that this HR component is not important, because people were treated horribly at the place that they work, and the place you work is supposed to be a safe place that you can do your job, right? You're not supposed to go into an office and be mentally berated day after day after day. So it is important, but the larger focus here needs to be the corruption of this government and how they have squandered, again, hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money.
Well, and frankly, that's an abuse on Canadians.
That's an abuse on everybody, not just the folks that work there.
Right.
I want to move now to the serious issue related to the transition from the former SDTC to the new entity that's being spearheaded by ISED. ISED officials were present in this committee not long ago. I had asked a very poignant question related to two facts. One, there is an existing list of companies that are found in conflict of interest. My second question was, is it responsible for the government to reclaim those funds? I'll ask you the same question. Do you believe it's responsible for the government, at the very least, I know the damage has already been done, but to recoup those costs that were awarded to companies based on conflict of interest?
Absolutely.
It's imperative in my mind that this be something that's core to the recommendations of this study and core to the work of trying to rebuild public trust in institutions, is making sure we get some of this money back. And I know with the committee's support here, we can hopefully entertain such a recommendation later on. In addition to that, the new ISED organization that will be taking in this work, what recommendations do you have to them for two things? One, the direct support for employees, a better management system for HR, for example, and two, how we reduce these kinds of conflicts of interest moving forward. What are your recommendations to the new department?
I think the movement into the federal government will be fine on the conflict of interest, because, one of the things that didn't exist at SDTC was the channels that exist for federal employees.
Sorry, just because of time, that's really important what you just said. Moving this from an arm's length agency established in 2001 that has no accountability is actually better suited to be put into the public service, because the public service, the federal government, within its own system, has more systems, including a union. Wouldn't you agree?
Exactly.
Yeah, the union, if there was a union in this case, like the Public Service Alliance of Canada, this may have never happened if employees had the option to go to their union, correct?
Of course, the NDP trying to be like, we still like unions, guys. Please come vote for us.
Yeah.
Also, the sound on that last bit, that wasn't us. That was the parliamentary sound guys. They've
been dropping the ball. This
Yeah, I
committee.
was going to say they've been having some difficulty during this committee. It's also because the MPs are like leaning into the mics, leaning back away from the mics.
Yeah, but this is actually why we haven't been showing the block, because they've
The
been
sound
blasting the sound of the interpreters. So.
Yeah, it's been really harsh.
But
Anyway.
Yeah. Not every workplace needs a union, Desjardins, and NDP.
Well, and just because a workplace has a union doesn't mean it's a good union. That's something to keep in mind. That
Right.
sometimes the leaders of the union
Are terrible.
Yeah, can be really bad. I mean, look at what is it, the Ontario Public Service Alliance? They've come under some serious scrutiny recently in the press.
Oh yeah, like there's many problems. Now there's some good unions out there as
Yeah,
well.
don't get us wrong, like they do exist, but I don't like the way that the NDP just makes these blanket statements that, well, none of this would have happened if there was a union. It could be better, it could be worse. We don't know, unfortunately.
I know for a fact that none of the problems at SDTC would have happened if they were public sector employees protected under the union rights that exist.
Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please. This will be your last slot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During this so-called cleanup period at SDTC, updated contribution agreements have been completed. You indicated in your testimony that the effect of these contribution agreements is to make retroactive what were previously ineligible or conflicted projects eligible. To be clear, these contribution agreements, these updated contribution agreements, are prepared by ICIT. Is that correct?
Yes.
And they would have to be signed off by the minister, Minister Champagne, correct?
Correct.
Whoa,
I was gonna say, that seemed significant.
didn't know that. So, so the original contribution agreements that had these companies that received funding from the SDTC would have classified them as ineligible. So Champagne says, I know a way to fix that. We'll just make them all eligible for the new contribution agreements. And, we learned that in one of the previous videos in this series. I didn't know it was Champagne himself that would be approving that.
Do you think it's possible that it was his parliamentary secretary that could have signed off? Or do you think it had to be him?
It doesn't matter. He's the minister.
He's accountable. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. Astounding. The Auditor General found, turning to COVID relief bonuses and payments, the Auditor General found that the SDTC board improperly approved $38.5 million in so-called COVID relief payments. In addition, the Auditor General found that in blatant conflicts of interest, board members voted to funnel millions of dollars of these payments into their own companies 63 times, 63 conflicts of interest, and the SDTC board chair, Annette Verschaeren, was found guilty of violating the Conflict of Interest Act by the Ethics Commissioner for funneling nearly $220,000 of these payments into her own company. These payments were approved days before the end of fiscal year 2019-20 and 2020-21, correct?
Correct.
Is it correct that board members and executives were incentivized with bonuses if SDTC met certain funding goals in a fiscal year, in other words, getting money out the door?
Correct.
I would note that immediately prior to the approval of the so-called COVID relief payments in both fiscal years, SDTC had fallen short of meeting its funding goals. Is it fair to say that this nearly $40 million improper COVID giveaway had an impact on bonuses that board members received?
Can I say more than just correct?
Yes.
Well, I think it seems like because they're in the final round, like Michael Cooper's trying to rapid fire off his questions and get as much information out of witness one as he can, as fast as he can. So I'm guessing that's kind of where that came from, but I'm really curious to see the answer now.
A lot of this COVID relief payment it's not just a conflict of interest. They could have approved this payment, and that would have it would have provided more of the funding that was already pre-approved. So all you were doing was adding in 5% that was already provided. For these COVID payments, they added additional 5%. So this is where they went above and beyond the logic of what you should have been doing, because even if the companies had a problem, you could have just provided them more of what was provided already, but instead they chose to add additional components of funding that never met any eligibility.
Right. And did that impact their bonuses?
Exactly.
Yes.
It impacted their bonuses.
So essentially, let me just clarify, if you would agree, board members voted to improperly funnel money out the door, including into their own companies, so that they could then turn around and pad their pockets with even more money in the way of bonuses. Is that a fair characterization of what happened?
For the case of Annette Verscharen's Store, in that second COVID payment, in the same few days that she received that second COVID payment, her company was already in the process of getting over $200,000 as part of the regular SDTC process. So again, this is a question of knowing better.
Wow. And when she was found guilty of an ethics violation, 2 ethics violations, if I'm not mistaken, it's $500 per ethics violation, isn't it? So essentially, commit an ethics violation, get $220,000 and pay $1,000 back. Like, that's why our ethics laws in this country right now are a joke, because there's hardly any, what would you say?
Well, there's no accountability.
Yeah, that's the right word, accountability.
And there's no repercussions. There's no consequences. And, she's just going to move along and run her company. And
yeah, because she's not on SDTC anymore, but I haven't heard that she's stepped down as a board member or chair, whatever she was, of her own company.
Well, and you haven't heard that she's, doing the altruistic thing of returning the money.
Right, you haven't heard that either. I imagine that would be in the papers. And this is why Michael Barrett is trying to get something, I believe, in as a private member's bill to increase the amount of money that you pay if you are convicted of an ethics violation, as well as you could face possible jail time.
Well, and also if you're held in contempt of Parliament, you want penalties in that as well, because this is a joke.
It is a joke. Like, our laws are, well, they harken back to a time where somebody's reputation was really all they had. I mean, where we lived in small little communities, and if you were found of an ethics violation in Parliament, it was a huge deal, and you couldn't do business ever anywhere. But now we're pretty globalized, right? If you're convicted of an ethics violation here, maybe you have some trouble here in Canada, well, you just leave and go somewhere else.
Well, and it comes down to this principle, right? And this is important. There are certain crimes that include corruption, right? But not all corruption is classified as a crime.
Right.
And we need to be moving towards a model, especially within government, where all corruption is classified as a crime.
Right. It should be a breach of the public trust, because it is.
Not just illegally approving funding.
Now, Annette Verscharen at committee has attempted to justify these improper and conflict-ridden payments on the basis that companies within SDTC's portfolio were badly struggling during COVID and needed emergency funding to survive. But that's not accurate, is it?
SDTC actually did a complete survey of the whole portfolio, which showed that the majority of companies didn't require additional funding, including the majority of the board members' companies, which is why they then went ahead and approved it for everyone, because had they done a more effective job, it wouldn't have given the majority of SDTC companies and the board members' companies any money.
Wow.
And they also wouldn't have gotten their bonuses.
Holy. That is corrupt to the core.
Yeah, like you can't get worse in terms of, this type of corruption.
What this says to me is that the board members really don't care about the homelessness crisis in this country, or they don't care that 25% of Canadians are living in poverty, or almost as many, almost 25%, are going to have to use a food bank this fall. They just care about getting your money.
Well, and they're essentially subsidizing their own companies,
their own lifestyles,
with taxpayer money. And there's other companies out there that most likely are eligible and deserve this funding that didn't get it because of these greedy little fingers of these greedy little Liberal appointed board members. It's just disgusting.
It is.
I just want to turn very quickly to Ed Vandenberg. He was provided counsel to the SDTC board, notwithstanding the fact that he was a member of the council. Is that correct?
Correct, and he's also conveniently retired.
And he was being remunerated, right?
Correct.
And that would be in violation of the SDTC Act.
Correct.
Did Annette Verschera know of that?
She did.
And what about the Assistant Deputy Minister Noseworthy?
They would all know this.
And presumably Minister Champagne would have known of it as well.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Again, credible answer. I don't think Champagne would have known about that.
Right, because if you don't like the guy, it'd be so easy to just be like, oh yeah, you would totally know. But witness one, again, proves his credibility by being truthful.
Well, this is why it's so important that people tell the truth.
100%.
Because when you say, I don't know, or when you say, no, probably not, when, it could be very easy to just, give into that confirmation bias, it increases your credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why politicians and the Conservatives, they really need to remember this, is when you make a mistake, you need to come out and say, we made a mistake, and this is how we're going to fix it.
Yeah, but, this whole SDTC thing is not a mistake. This is just pure corruption.
Oh, for sure. But, if this was, let's say the Liberals accidentally appointed a bunch of corrupt people, and I mean accidentally, and Champagne didn't know any of this crap that was going on. And then this was brought to ISET, and then Champagne knew and said, what the hell is going on here? And then ended up doing an investigation, finding what happened. The first thing he should have done, called a press conference and said, okay, this is what's happening at the SDTC. It is deplorable, and we are going to be fixing it. We're firing everybody.
We're suspending its operations until we can be confident that this isn't going on anymore, et cetera, et cetera. There's a million things they could have done.
And that would at least give the public perception of, oh wow, they're coming out and telling the story. Remember, be first.
Right.
Be first and be truthful, because that's how you get trust. But they choose not to do that because Champagne knew of all this crap that was going on. Trudeau knew of all this crap was going on, and here you go.
You've stated, actually, that McCarthy corrupted the review process. Can you please provide any records, emails, communication on ISET or McCarthy impeding employees, former or currently employed at SDTC, in participating with the McCarthy review?
Only on the condition that McCarthy also provide all of those similar communications.
I'm not sure we have the authority to do that, but...
Wow.
But I love that matter of fact, only on the condition that they also do the thing. And I'm going to pour myself a glass of water now. And Bradford just, well, I'm not sure we have the authority to do it. Why not?
Ask the chair. The chair will know. And if the chair doesn't know, the clerk will know.
Well, but here's the thing. Doesn't that report belong to SDTC? Ergo, doesn't that belong to the government?
One would think.
So if that is the case, then absolutely you have the power to do that, because that belongs to the government. You paid them to do it.
Well, and again, if you're not sure, you can put forward a motion that you call the folks who did the report into committee, and then you can ask them for the report.
Yeah, summon them.
Right.
Go get it.
I'm asking you if you can provide your records, so I don't know as you get to dictate the terms under which you do that. You've made these allegations, so I think it's fair that you would provide the proof to the committee. It's you that's making the allegations. So again, if it implies McCarthy, well then it implies McCarthy.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Okay. So because you've stated that McCarthy corrupted the review process, can you provide any records, emails, or communication on ISET or McCarthy impeding employees, former or currently employed at SDTC, in participating in the McCarthy review?
Can you describe what your understanding of what my definition of corruption was?
Well, I corrupted the review process. You're alleging that they prevented some people from participating and encouraged others to, meaning that they would skew the whole results. So we're asking you to provide the records that would back up those allegations.
So for that situation, again, as I've mentioned, people are under NDA, and how am I supposed to, technically I shouldn't even know that they tried to do this because they were under NDA. So again, I don't know, you're kind of trapping me in something that I cannot do unless they are released from their NDA. So I would agree to do this as long as everyone gets their NDAs removed.
So how did you know, how did you become aware of it?
Because
I guess
they
that's
broke
what
their
we're trying to
NDAs
find.
and told me.
Pardon?
Because they broke their NDAs to tell me.
Well,
I'm just taken aback because it's an interesting quandary that that he's in. Because does he have direct evidence? No. And this may be the first mistake he's made, because now we're talking hearsay if he doesn't have direct understanding of the situation.
but okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but any witnesses that are called to committee, are they not under parliamentary privilege, like they're protected? So should they not be able to speak freely, NDA or not?
I don't think an NDA is waived in that case.
In parliamentary privilege, it's waived in a criminal case, though, isn't it?
Yes, I believe it is waived in a criminal case, but I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know.
Good thing there's a few on that committee on the conservative side.
Yeah.
What about any records pertaining to ISID manipulating McCarthy's findings? Because that's another allegation you've made, that ISID actually tried to manipulate the findings of McCarthy. So we would need to see that. That shouldn't involve any NDAs by employees.
I would mention the disclaimer that I've mentioned several times as proof, because again, if they are saying that it wasn't manipulated, why do they have a disclaimer saying that it was?
So we asked a question off camera, and the question was, could these potential witnesses be brought forth to committee, and could they testify breaking their NDA without consequence? And the short answer is yes, they can, because they would be covered by parliamentary privilege. This is the good side of parliamentary privilege, whereas most of what we've been talking about is evidence that is given in committee can't necessarily be used in a criminal investigation because of parliamentary privilege. That's the problem of it. But it allows people to tell the committee information of things that may be covered by NDA, and they cannot be sued by anyone who actually signed the NDA with them. Now, the problem is that many of these people would not want their identities to be known under, which they've actually signed their NDA, because they may still be working for the organization, or
they may face retribution after. So we can understand the hesitancy of witnesses.
Especially when you're talking about people that are under abuse and harassment and that sort of thing.
Well, again, it takes a toll on you mentally, for sure. And you may not want to have to open yourself up to that again, or you may not 100% believe that, it's okay if I come to Parliament and testify because of parliamentary privilege. Like you might not want to test that, and I can completely understand that.
Well, especially when they see the treatment of some people that come to committee, and they see the treatment by witnesses by Liberals, and all they're interested in is discrediting or shutting down the testimony of people that take time out of their lives and come to committee to tell their story. We've seen that. So it's a tough spot to be in, but
But that's the information that we were able to find. So hopefully that's taken into consideration.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. I will say this to the witness. If there's other documents that you wish to table, we will certainly accept them. Anything with respect to either the department or the ministry. So I know there was a bit of back and forth there. Things, upon reflection, if you feel there's documents you have that you can share with us, I think the members from all sides would appreciate that.
Well, Mr. Williamson, I don't know if all sides would appreciate that.
Yeah, not the side trying to cover it up.
Yeah, pretty sure the Liberals won't appreciate that. But considering where the parties stand now, it seems like all of the opposition parties would appreciate that. That's for darn sure. And but this is the end of the testimony of Witness 1, and I don't think I've ever seen so much relevant testimony in a single committee.
Coming from one witness.
Coming from one witness.
So, you know, I don't say this lightly, but thank you, Witness 1, for being brave enough to come forward and expose this so all Canadians can see it.
And every Canadian needs to see this, no matter what party you vote for. You know, it shouldn't matter. Canada shouldn't be about party. It should be about what's best for Canadians. And sometimes looking at the party that you vote for and seeing them do very corrupt things is very hard to see. It's almost, you know, in some people's lives, if they're lifelong supporters of that party, if you put yourself in their shoes, that would be very difficult. People that are lifelong conservatives, if the Conservatives were found to
do even like a fraction of what's going on here,
it would be devastating.
It would be. But we as Canadians need to stand up and speak out when our elected officials are working against the best interest of Canada and its citizens.
So it's not about party, it's about Canada. And that's what Canada used to be about. We didn't used to be about one side versus the other. You know, we used to be about what is best for all Canadians, and we need to get back there. So, you know, it's time to have these conversations where people that support any parties come together and we drop the political rhetoric. We start talking about what do we need to move forward. And we also need to acknowledge that there's a significant problem in this country, and it starts with the Liberal Party and how they have governed this country into the depths of utter corruption, as evidenced by the latest scandal. And the problem is we don't know how many more there are. So it's in the best interest of Canadians to get this party out as soon as humanly possible.